My wife dumped me for her boss during our 10th anniversary party, but her family disowned her, and karma crushed her life in 7 months. I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything as I sit here typing this. It's been 3 days since my entire world came crashing down, and honestly, writing it all out is my attempt to make some kind of sense of it. This isn't easy to talk about, hell, it's hard to even type. I never thought I'd be one of those guys posting relationship horror stories online. I'm going with the names Mark and Sarah here, mostly because those seem like the standard placeholders everyone uses, and I'm paranoid someone we know will put 2 and 2 together. Then again, what happened was so wild, anyone who witnessed it probably wouldn't need much help recognizing it. Anyway, I guess I should start with the basics. Up until 3 days ago, I genuinely believed I was in a solid marriage. Not perfect, whose is, but stable. We had plans, dreams, a future. Or so I thought. Turns out, all of that went straight down the drain. For some context, my wife Sarah has always had a pretty intense personality. If things don't go her way or someone dares to disagree with her, she flips the switch from calm to chaos in seconds. She talks fast, gets loud, sometimes tosses little objects, slams doors, you name it. She creates a storm until everyone caves in, and then gives you the cold shoulder until she gets what she wants. I put up with this behavior for years, mostly because I loved her and figured it was easier to keep the peace than deal with the mess that followed a disagreement. I know how that sounds. Trust me, I do. But it's like that story about the frog in boiling water, you don't realize how bad it's gotten until you're already cooked. After a decade together, I had basically developed an internal radar for her moods. I could sense when she was about to blow and had learned to tiptoe around her triggers. I had all these little strategies for keeping things calm, for de-escalating situations before they exploded. Let me give you a couple of examples before I dive into the big one, just so you get a clearer picture of what life with Sarah looked like. About 3 years ago, we were getting ready to do some major upgrades to our house. Nothing too wild, just updating the kitchen and redoing the master bathroom. We'd been saving for it for years, and I was genuinely looking forward to making our home feel more like our space instead of the basic starter house we'd bought. Sarah immediately took control of the project, which I didn't mind, she's always had a better eye for design than I do. But then she picked a contractor based on a single meeting. She thought he was great, said he seemed charming and confident. No price comparison, no background check, nothing. Just vibes. When I looked at his quote, I immediately saw some red flags. For starters, the budget was way over what we'd planned. They claimed they could completely gut and rebuild the kitchen in 2 weeks, which anyone who's ever done a renovation knows is laughably unrealistic. The breakdown of materials was also super vague, stuff like premium countertops and high-end cabinetry without mentioning any actual brands or specifications. It smelled fishy. I'd seen enough horror stories on Reddit to know this was how nightmares started. So I carefully suggested we get a couple more quotes, just to be smart. I wasn't saying she'd made a bad call, I just thought it was a good idea to compare. You'd think I accused her of setting the place on fire. She absolutely blew up. Screamed that I was sabotaging everything, that I didn't respect her judgment, and that she'd handle it all on her own from now on. She claimed I was always like this, always criticizing, always making her feel dumb. Then she stormed out and gave me the silent treatment for 2 straight days. Imagine living in the same house with someone who acts like you don't exist because you suggested getting a second estimate on a massive renovation. Eventually, I got her to agree, mostly by leaving renovation disaster articles open on my laptop in plain sight. We did end up getting another quote, and surprise, surprise, the original contractor was a ripoff. The second company not only offered a better price and more realistic timeline, but they also pointed out several issues the first guy had conveniently ignored. Sarah chose the second contractor in the end, but she never admitted she was wrong. No apology, no acknowledgement, just acted like the fight had never happened and that she had always planned to pick the second guy. I didn't press it. I was just relieved we weren't about to get screwed over. I mentally filed it away as another argument that wasn't worth revisiting. Another time, this was about 1.5 years ago, we were planning our annual vacation. We had this deal where we'd take turns picking the destination, and it was my year. We'd talked before about doing something outdoorsy, maybe a cozy cabin near a national park with some good hiking spots. We've always loved nature, or at least I thought we did. Sarah had seemed to enjoy our previous trips, campfires, wine, stargazing. Honestly, some of our best memories came from those quiet evenings under the stars. I spent months researching. Had a folder full of links, affordable cabins near Yosemite, guided hikes, even meal kit services that would deliver to your cabin so we could cook together without the hassle. I dropped hints here and there, and Sarah seemed into it, asking questions, showing interest. Then one afternoon, out of nowhere, she comes home with a glossy travel magazine and starts gushing about this luxury Caribbean resort with private plunge pools and personal butlers. Just like that, our trip was suddenly going to be poolside cocktails instead of hiking boots. The place was triple our agreed-upon budget, and when I gently reminded her about the outdoor trip I'd spent months planning, not to mention the cost, she lost it. She accused me of being a buzzkill, said I was trying to ruin her experiences and that I was being cheap. Claimed that all our friends took lavish vacations and that I was making her look bad. She even threw a decorative pillow across the room, smashing a frame with one of our wedding photos in it. Looking back now, that felt pretty symbolic. She ended the whole meltdown by saying she'd just booked the place herself if I was going to be such a downer. Then she slammed the bedroom door so hard it knocked a painting off the wall and didn't speak to me for the rest of the night. I slept on the couch. The next morning, when I tried to talk it through, she acted like nothing had happened. Later that day, she booked the resort and put it on our joint credit card before I could say a word. I didn't push back. I knew what that would lead to: days or even weeks of cold shoulders, nasty comments, and silent punishment. So we went. The resort itself was beautiful, sure. But I couldn't fully enjoy it knowing how we ended up there and how much it had cost us, financially and emotionally. And that right there, that pattern, played out again and again throughout our marriage. I'd raise a concern, she'd blow up, shut down, then bulldoze forward anyway. I got used to it. I'd calmly say what I thought, she'd explode, and I'd cave to keep the peace. Our friends used to joke that Sarah wore the pants in our relationship. They'd nudge me with a grin and say stuff like, "Happy wife, happy life, huh, Mark?" And I'd laugh with them like it didn't sting. Because really, what was I supposed to do? Stand up there and admit I was scared of my own wife? Admit I had quietly surrendered the idea of being a true equal in our marriage just to avoid her outbursts? I'd stopped pushing back a long time ago because it just wasn't worth the emotional landmines. Looking back now, I can see how toxic that dynamic really was. But when you're living inside it day after day, it just starts to feel normal. You stop questioning it. You make adjustments. You convince yourself that every couple has their weird patterns, and this is just one of ours. And to be fair, I did love her. There were genuinely good moments. But constantly walking on eggshells, not knowing when the next explosion was coming, and always having my thoughts and needs pushed aside, it wears a person down over time. I just didn't realize how badly until it all fell apart. Now let me tell you what happened 3 nights ago, the night everything shattered and I was forced to see my wife for who she really was. We were celebrating our 10-year anniversary at a nice rented event space downtown. It was a beautiful setup. About 50 guests, our closest friends, some of my coworkers, and all of Sarah's family. Her parents and both of her younger brothers were there. My own family couldn't attend. My parents moved to Portugal after retiring, and my sister lives in Australia, so they were too far away. In hindsight, that might have been a blessing. At least they didn't have to witness what unfolded firsthand. The evening had been going pretty smoothly. Great food, open bar, everyone in good spirits. A few guests gave heartfelt toasts during dinner, sharing memories and wishing us well. Sarah seemed genuinely happy. She was being sweet, holding my hand under the table, leaning in to whisper snarky little jokes about the speeches. Everything felt normal. Or at least it seemed that way. After dinner, I was getting ready to step up to the little stage to thank everyone for coming. I had a short speech planned, nothing elaborate, just a few kind words about Sarah and our decade together. But right before I could make my move, Sarah suddenly beat me to it. She walked up to the stage with her boss, David. That alone caught me off guard. As far as I knew, he wasn't even invited. We'd finalized the guest list together, and he definitely wasn't on it. Apparently, he showed up about an hour into the event after Sarah had briefly disappeared, something I hadn't thought much of at the time. Her family looked just as thrown off by his presence as I was. I even saw her dad shoot her mom a puzzled glance as David walked in. Then it got worse. Sarah grabbed the microphone, and the room slowly fell silent as everyone turned toward the stage. She had this odd expression on her face, not her usual cheerful smile, but something smug, like she was proud of something she hadn't shared yet. She started by saying the night was about more than just our 10-year milestone. It was, she said, about her new journey. At first, I figured she was about to announce some job promotion or maybe a new business venture. But that hope was crushed fast. Out of nowhere, she told the entire room she was leaving me. Everything just froze. You could have heard a pin drop. People were looking at her, then at me, then back at her, like they couldn't believe what they were hearing. I couldn't breathe. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest so hard I couldn't even react. My mind just locked up. Sarah? Leaving me? That sentence didn't compute. It wasn't just shocking, it was impossible. But she kept going. And it somehow got even worse. She gestured to David, this guy standing beside her like a smug stand-in for the life she was about to steal. A man I knew. A man who had been in our home, sat at our table, smiled at me while apparently sleeping with my wife behind my back. She announced she was leaving me for him. That she had finally found someone man enough to give her what she wanted, a baby and a family. Those words, man enough, cut right through me like glass. We had been trying to conceive for a couple years, and it hadn't been easy. I'd recently learned I had some fertility issues. It was still raw, still something I was struggling to accept, something only a few close people even knew about. And now she was using it as ammunition in front of everyone we cared about. Then she ended her announcement like she was closing a deal. This is happening now. This is my choice. And I'm moving forward with it. The way she said it, so cold, so matter of fact, I barely recognized the voice. It didn't sound like the woman I had married. She wasn't emotional or apologetic. She was calm, calculated, almost robotic. I was frozen. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. My heart was racing but my body was paralyzed. It felt like I'd been hit by a truck but was somehow still standing. My skin went hot, then cold. The room started spinning, the walls bending slightly like I was underwater. All around me, faces stared in stunned silence. People who had just been raising glasses to us now looked at me with pity. Co-workers who'd never seen me lose my composure now had front row seats to my personal apocalypse. Then I glanced at Sarah, standing tall beside David like they were proud of what they'd done. Like it was some sort of victory. My head was spinning, trying to make sense of how long this had been going on. When had it started? How did I miss it? She had kissed me goodbye just that morning. We'd shared dinner the night before, going over the last-minute details for this very party. And now she was standing in front of everyone we knew, detonating our life together with no warning. And just when I thought the humiliation had peaked, something incredible happened. Sarah's dad suddenly stood up and pointed at her from across the room. His voice rang out, full of anger and heartbreak. Your behavior is shameful, Sarah. The things you're saying about Mark are cruel and untrue. Doing this in front of everyone? It's disgusting. Then her mom stood up beside him and said, we didn't raise you to be like this. We want no part of what you're doing. But it didn't stop there. Her father looked her dead in the eye and said the words I'll never forget. Because of how you've acted tonight, because of the way you've publicly humiliated your husband and disgraced yourself, we no longer consider you part of this family. You're on your own now, Sarah. And just like that, they turned and walked out. Her whole family, both brothers included, followed them out the door without a second glance, even as Sarah called after them in a panic. I'd known her family for over 10 years. They were traditional folks, big on morals, loyalty, and family unity. I'd never seen them look at her that way, like they didn't even recognize who she was. That's when it really sank in for me. If even they were done with her, then this wasn't just shocking. It was unforgivable. Sarah clearly hadn't expected that reaction. She started freaking out, her voice going high and frantic, though I could barely make out what she was saying over the ringing in my ears. David tried to touch her arm, maybe to calm her down, but she jerked away like he'd burned her. In that moment, she looked completely unhinged. The smug, triumphant act was gone. She didn't look like someone who had it all figured out. She looked like someone who had just blown up her entire life and was only now realizing it. That's when I finally snapped out of my daze. Some strange kind of calm took over me, like my brain flipped a switch and turned all the pain off for now, just to get me through what came next. I stood up and quietly made my way to the stage. It was like my brain flipped into autopilot just so I could function. I kept my voice steady, flat, even as I stared both of them down and said, "You need to leave." And the sound of my own voice threw me. It didn't even sound like me anymore. It was colder. Detached. Like it belonged to someone else entirely. David, that arrogant bastard, actually had the nerve to try smoothing things over. He started with, "Mark, we need to talk," but I cut him off right there. "No, we don't," I said, cutting through him like a blade. "You both need to get the hell out of here before I break your face." I pointed toward the same exit Sarah's family had just used. Whatever they saw in my face must have convinced them I wasn't bluffing. They didn't argue. They didn't try to explain. Just exchanged a look, then walked off the stage and over to a table where they'd left their stuff. They left without another word. 50 people stood there in stunned silence, eyes bouncing between them and me, like they were watching a live car crash and waiting for the final explosion. My boss was there. His wife, too. Old friends who'd known Sarah and me from the beginning. People who had watched us grow as a couple, celebrated our milestones. I felt like I owed them something, anything, to bring some kind of closure to the mess that had just gone down. So I went back to the mic, cleared my throat and said, "Well, I think it's safe to say the party's over. I'm sorry it had to end like this." My voice cracked slightly, but I held it together. Thanks to everyone who came. I really do appreciate it. What else could I possibly say? Surprise! My wife's been cheating on me with her boss and decided to blow up our marriage in front of all of you. Or maybe, don't mind me, I'm just dying a slow death inside while standing under fluorescent lights. There was nothing that could fix it. No way to unsee it. No speech that could erase the shock or embarrassment etched into everyone's faces. People started collecting their things, whispering quietly, giving me these deeply uncomfortable looks full of sympathy and disbelief. A few of my closest friends came over, patted my back, offered quick hugs, said things like, "Call me if you need anything," or "Man, I'm so sorry." I nodded, thanked them, but I honestly couldn't absorb any of it. Their words felt distant, like I was listening through thick glass. About half an hour later, the place was completely cleared out. Just me and a couple of staff members from the venue, who clearly didn't know where to look. They moved around quietly, cleaning up as respectfully as they could. I stayed to help clean up too, not just because it was part of the rental agreement, but because I needed something to do. Anything that felt routine or normal. I couldn't just stand there drowning in my own thoughts. The venue manager kept sneaking sympathetic glances at me, which somehow made it all worse. I paid the remaining balance, signed whatever forms she slid across the table, and finally headed home. When I stepped into our empty house, that's when everything hit me like a freight train. 10 years. Gone. Just gone. I sat down on the edge of our bed, the same bed we'd shared for a decade, and broke down. No holding it in, no pretending I was okay. I don't even know how long I sat there, but eventually I pulled myself together enough to check my phone. That was a mistake. There were dozens of messages from Sarah. A full flood of texts, all over the map. She was clearly rattled by how her family had reacted, shocked, she said. "I can't believe they would do this to me," one message read. She admitted the announcement was a bad idea, but made it clear she wasn't backing down from her decision to leave. "I shouldn't have done it that way," she wrote, "but you have to understand, I need to move on." She kept suggesting we meet up. Said we should sit down with a counselor to help us transition. Transition what, exactly? Our broken marriage into a polite friendship? She even tried to paint the whole public betrayal as some kind of emotional cry for help, without ever saying what help she supposedly needed. As if detonating our relationship in front of 50 people was just a misunderstood SOS signal. Then, of course, came the blame. If you'd just been more attentive. If you took my needs seriously, the usual guilt trip. As if I forced her to cheat. As if I left her on stage in front of all our friends. Her tone kept shifting. One message she was the heartbroken victim abandoned by her cruel family. The next, she was the mature one offering me a calm and civil way to talk things through. Then she flipped again, casting herself as the misunderstood wife who had no choice but to blow things up because her husband just didn't see her. It was classic Sarah. Always spinning the story, always repositioning herself as the hero, or at least the one who got hurt the most. She never could admit when she'd done something awful. She just twisted the narrative until she looked like the one who deserved sympathy. But this time, there was no twisting it. She had crossed a line that there was no walking back from. No apology could undo what she did. I didn't respond to any of her messages. I didn't answer her calls. I had nothing to say to her anymore. Instead, the next morning, I got online and booked a meeting with a divorce attorney. I wasn't looking for advice. I didn't need anyone to tell me if I was making the right decision. I knew. I just needed to make it official. I walked into that lawyer's office, told him exactly what had happened, gave him the rundown on our marriage, our finances, our assets, and told him to start drawing up the papers. Update, 1 week later. Thanks to everyone who commented on my original post. Some of you had questions about the party and how Sarah's family reacted, so here's a quick recap with some clarifications. The event took place in a private room we'd rented specifically for the night. Sarah's parents and brothers had been there from the start, seated near the stage at a reserved table. My family, like I mentioned, lives overseas, Portugal and Australia, so they weren't able to attend. Probably for the best. As for David, Sarah's boss, he wasn't invited. Not even as a +1. He arrived about an hour into the event. Sarah had stepped out briefly, then came back with him. Based on the looks on her parents' faces, they were just as surprised as I was. For those asking about what exactly she said, I don't remember the word-for-word script, it was all a blur, but the gist of it was something like, "Everyone, I have an announcement. Tonight isn't just about celebrating 10 years of marriage. It's about a new beginning for me. I'm leaving Mark. I'm leaving Mark for David." She pointed right at him. "I've found someone who's better for me. Someone who's man enough to give me what I want, like a baby, and a real family. This is happening now. This is my decision. I'm moving forward. That was the moment I knew I needed to file for divorce. Not just because she ended our marriage. Not just because she did it in public. But because she humiliated me, lied, exposed personal things we'd only shared with a few people, and made a spectacle out of something deeply private. Even her own family, people who had loved her no matter what, cut ties with her over it. That's how far over the line she went. Her messages after the fact? They were just damage control. None of them included a sincere apology or any sign she actually regretted what she'd done. Just frantic spin, vague excuses, and emotional manipulation. The morning after the party, I walked into that law office and didn't hesitate for a second. I told them to begin the process. I'm not looking back. After my lawyer filed the official petition to dissolve the marriage, I signed it and had a process server deliver the paperwork to Sarah at the house, where she was still living at the time. Once she got served, things escalated fast. Her messages started coming in constantly, and the tone quickly turned hostile. She began demanding I withdraw the divorce filing, insisting I had no right to end the marriage, and claimed the entire party incident was just a mistake I was blowing out of proportion. She bounced between rage and insults, flipping from calling me heartless to saying I was trying to destroy her life, as if she wasn't the one who had nuked our relationship in front of everyone we knew. I didn't respond to any of it. I just saved every single message and forwarded the threatening one straight to my attorney. I told him to inform Sarah's lawyer. Yes, she went out and hired one almost immediately, that moving forward, all communication about the divorce had to go through legal channels. I was done talking to her directly. And that's where things stood, divorce proceedings officially underway, all communication routed through our attorneys, and me just trying to figure out how to put the pieces of my life back together. Update, 7 months later. It's been a while since my last post, and a lot has happened. The divorce is officially finalized now. For the first time in what feels like forever, I can actually breathe again. After Sarah got the divorce papers and brought her lawyer into the mix, she filed her formal response to the petition. Of course, she left out the actual reason our marriage ended, the part where she dumped me publicly for her boss in front of 50 people and instead had the audacity to request alimony. Yep, alimony. After all of that, she wanted my financial support. Her request was based on our income difference and the length of our marriage, conveniently ignoring the fact that she humiliated me in the most public and vicious way possible. It was like she thought she could rewrite history and cast herself as the victim. Around that same time, I started hearing from mutual friends that Sarah was reaching out to people behind my back, spreading a totally different version of what happened, twisting things to make herself look like the one who'd been wronged. So while she was asking the court for my money, she was also trying to destroy my reputation with anyone who'd listen. That was my breaking point. When my lawyer showed me her alimony request, we sat down to talk about how cases like this are usually handled in our state. The judge would look at things like income, the duration of the marriage, all the standard stuff, but sometimes, how the marriage ended could factor into it too. So, my lawyer drafted a formal response to her attorney. We didn't make any threats. We simply laid out that, if Sarah insisted on going after alimony, we'd be submitting detailed evidence about what actually caused our separation. That meant sworn testimony from me, witness statements from people at the party, and a full account of her behavior, her speech, her announcement, the exact words she used to humiliate me, and her own family's public reaction and disownment. Everything would be by the book. But it would all come out in court if she kept pushing. It worked. Within just a few days, her lawyer contacted mine and said Sarah was dropping the alimony request. The paperwork to officially withdraw it was filed soon after. And from what I've heard since then, life hasn't exactly been kind to Sarah. Roughly 2 months after the anniversary party, she either left or got fired from the company where David, her boss and so-called better man, worked. Apparently, she's had a tough time finding similar work since then. Her finances took a serious hit, and she ended up having to move in with a cousin because she couldn't afford to live on her own. As far as I know, her family hasn't spoken to her since that night. They've held firm in their decision to cut ties, which means her support system is basically gone. So, here's how it all played out in order. Sarah ended our marriage in public at our anniversary party. Her entire family disowned her on the spot. I filed for divorce the very next day. She demanded alimony. My lawyer informed hers that we'd present detailed evidence in court. She withdrew the request. She lost her job. She moved in with a relative due to financial struggles. The court finalized our divorce and split our assets cleanly. She's no longer employed at her old company. She's not receiving a single cent from me. She's living with a cousin. Her life now looks very different from what it was before that night. We have zero direct contact anymore. If anything needs to be discussed, which is rare, it goes through the attorneys. That's it. And to my knowledge, her family still hasn't softened. They're still not speaking to her. I won't be posting any further updates. This chapter is closed, and I'm finally moving on with my life. These past 7 months have been the hardest I've ever endured. But for those asking about David, no, it didn't work out. From what I've heard, he and Sarah broke up shortly after she left the company. I don't know the details, and honestly, I couldn't care less. I just want to say thank you to everyone who commented, offered advice, or sent words of support throughout this whole ordeal. Your encouragement kept me grounded, especially during those moments when I felt tempted to cave in just to make the pain go away. I'm doing better now. And for the first time in a long time, I'm actually looking forward to whatever comes next.